Thank you. It's great to be here today. I'm excited to talk to you about a project that we've been working on at Holstein Association for a couple of years, and it's been exciting in the last few months since we've been able to talk about what we're doing a little bit more. And I want to share with you our vision for what we've been doing with this particular project focused on building a better cow using 3D imaging for phenotyping conformation traits. As you all know, artificial intelligence is changing a lot of things in our world and a lot of things in the dairy industry. If you walk around and look at the program for this meeting and many other meetings in our industry, you'll see a lot of information about artificial intelligence. And I know I am very excited about what is coming in terms of artificial intelligence. I'm excited about what's here already. In some fashion or another, I feel like I'm using AI every day in my life, in my work, and my personal life for that matter. And I'm sure that many of you are also. But sometimes I think maybe we get stuck in only thinking about the part of AI that most people are most familiar with right now, which is the large language model. So that would be things like ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot and Claude, where we can communicate with the computer basically in our language and get information returned back to us in a form that's useful for us. And I'm continually amazed about what those large language models can do. They really can make our lives easier and better if we're using some common sense in interpreting what they're providing for us. But that's only one piece of artificial intelligence. There's a lot of other things going on with advances in artificial intelligence for how we can look at data in new ways, how we can look at images in new ways and other areas. So I'm excited about it from many different perspectives. And I'm at a point in my career where I'm mid, I think, maybe a little past mid. And I know that I'm going to have to figure out how to best use AI in my world for the next 15 or 20 years of my career. And I think that many of us are facing that of how do we best utilize it. So it's an exciting time. But of course, there's some unknowns about what artificial intelligence might bring for us. Along those lines, you've also, if you've flown in recent times, you've seen computer vision in action. You've seen it when you check in for security. Recently, I took a flight where they never looked at my ID. They just did facial recognition to identify me, and it's amazing that they can do that with, that the computer engineers can do that for identifying people. And you've seen applications in computer vision applied to the dairy industry. And this is an example. This is actually a slide from my PhD work at Purdue University 20 years ago, where we were first starting to look at some of the potential applications for using computer vision for body condition scoring. And so these were a couple of the cows that we looked at. We scored those cows for body condition, and we looked at the angles around the hooks and the pens to be able to calculate body condition score. And we were pretty good with this algorithm for being able to calculate body condition score with these images. But that was 20 years ago. Now, what it was not was automated. So in fact, it was somebody, a graduate student, at that point that graduate student was me, clicking on thousands of images on all those points around the cow to be able to identify the points of interest to be able to calculate that cow's body condition. And we weren't able to automate the process of data collection in the way that we really wanted to at that point of time. But it was a good proof of concept. And of course, now you see applications of a body condition score on the market. There are a few different applications of body condition score on the market today that are being used around the world. And there's been a lot of interest in using vision, computer vision, for identifying patterns of locomotion, for lameness detection, There are a few different technologies on the market focused on that. We did some work a few years ago, again, more in a laboratory type of setting to explore what's possible with computer vision for locomotion scoring, and there's a lot of potential for that. And again, we see that with what's happening in the market today with a few different technologies as you walk around here that focus on locomotion. At the same time, one of the things that we think about within Holstein Association is the importance of conformation. And conformation has an important impact on the lifetime performance of the animal. So we did a study a few years ago where we had about 1 million cows in the data set, where we compared classification score and individual linear traits to lifetime performance. And what we saw in that data set was that lifetime production increased within each classification score category. So the cows that were 85 to 89 final score at their first score in their first lactation produced about 30,000 pounds more milk than those cows that were lacking in conformation. And you see that stair-step pattern where each category represented an increase in lifetime production. So functional conformation does matter for selection of animals within any dairy breed. So with all that in mind, we think that everything's in place. The tools, the technology, and the need to transition how we look at evaluating dairy cattle conformation. We spent the last couple of years developing an innovative technological solution designed to advance cattle conformation evaluation into a revolutionary new era. We have applied for a patent for this technology. If you're familiar with patenting, that's a long process. So patent pending, that is out there to protect our intellectual property that we've been working on. Our goals with the Build a Better Cow project are to conduct conformation trait evaluation reliably and consistently, to also record some management traits, things like body condition score and some locomotion indicators, to be able to design this to be a replicable system, a stationary system primarily targeted at large dairy farms, and to supplement but not replace classification. Ultimately, the long-term goal from this is to improve dairy cattle productive efficiency, profitability, and wellness by building a better cow. And you can see in the video here an example of a cow moving through the system where we're collecting that 3D image of that animal, the 3D video of that animal. The system itself uses 3 time-of-flight cameras strategically placed in the exit alley from the milking parlor. These cameras provide us a high-resolution 3D image of each cow as she passes through the system. And at the current time, we're measuring 26 traits, including body condition score, a few different locomotion indicators, and all of our linear traits. If you're not familiar with time-of-flight cameras are 3D imaging devices that measure depth across an object by calculating the time it takes for the light to get to that object and back to the camera. Unlike conventional cameras, these provide us with more depth and more accurate information about the object that we're looking at, in which our case, of course, is the cow. So the overall view of the system is we capture images, 3D images of the cow as the cows leave the parlor. We're using artificial intelligence, including techniques of deep learning and machine learning, to be able to process the information from that image. We're calculating the traits, basically using basic principles of geometry. I use the story all the time that I was the kid that was in middle school and high school taking geometry that said, why do I need geometry? I'm just interested in cows. And here I am later in my life applying geometry to the real world, in my world, the cow world. So anytime if you have kids and they tell you, I may never use that, telling the story about the guy from Kentucky that had to use geometry later in his life. After we calculate those traits, we deliver those traits in a CSV file or a spreadsheet format to be able to integrate that data into herd management software. Here's an example of the setup. The first farm, first prototype was at Western Kentucky University, where we have a long-term collaboration that we call the WKU Smart Holstein Lab, where we explore new technologies for the dairy industry. This is the prototype that we started with. So you see the size of that. It's a 9 feet long area. We have 3 cameras, as I mentioned. I'll show you those in a little bit more detail. The cow passes through that. Behind the cow is a green screen. It doesn't have to be green, but the reason for that is to block out all the noise that's behind that cow. In this particular image, in this particular system, when we started the project, we thought we were going to need to stop the cows to be able to get all of the information that we needed. We don't need to stop the cows. So there's a little bit more gating and so forth around there on this particular setup than what we need. The 3 cameras, there's one that's above the cow. There's one that kind of comes in behind the cow to be able to get some of the udder traits. It's on the side looking toward the rear of the cow. And then there's one on the side pointing toward the side of the cow. Now, it would be really wonderful if we could have done all this with one camera. And you see some of the other camera systems that are out there that are able to do that with one camera to get a top view of the animal. And we say many times when we're out there working with the cameras, wouldn't it be nice if we just had the top view? We can't just have the top view for what we're trying to do because we can't see the side of the cow. We can't see behind the cow, and we can't see the udder and the feet and legs. So we have the 3 cameras to be able to get the entire cow. So this is probably a little bit more realistic idea of what the system looks like. We have 2 other systems out there. This is one of the systems that's on a 2,200 cow dairy milking 3 times a day. And you can see these animals are moving through at a normal pace. In this case, our green screen is a black screen, but the animals move through without stopping. We don't have to have any kind of cow flow challenges there. Here's another example of the 3rd system that's out there. This is a 600 cow dairy, also milking 3 times a day, with the 3 cameras set up to be able to collect our video images. As I said, we get that smooth cow flow. You see it from 2 perspectives here. You see on the right how fast those animals are moving. We're still able to capture the information from those animals at that speed. And then you see on the left what that looks like from the above camera. Currently, where we're sitting, we have developed a robust system for capturing 26 traits. As I mentioned, all of our linear traits that we've measured in our traditional classification system, the locomotion indicators, and body condition. We co-developed this with breeder input. So some of those breeders are in the room today, but our board has been actively engaged in this process from day one. And I think that's one of the things that makes this unique is our board has helped design the parameters for what we're looking for in this system, and it provided us with many good insights to help make this something that we think can be useful. And we don't think there's anything on the market right now that measures as many different things as what we're measuring. So here's a list of what we're measuring today. We have our body traits, including standard traits like stature, body depth, chest width. Some things we had to move away from a general score. So like dairy form, for example, is somewhat subjective. We've divided dairy form into 3 traits. So we're measuring rib openness, wither angle, and spring of rib instead of dairy form. We have multiple things that we're looking at for the feet and legs, the foot angle, tracking up behavior, rear hoof distance, and the rear legs side and rear view. And of course, the udder being the most important part of the cow, we have more traits there than with the other 2. We're measuring all of the traits that we currently measure in our traditional classification system, plus a couple of other things that were relatively easy to pick up once we had the image of the 3D animal. Now, we are looking at some what we call management traits beyond conformation. That would be the body condition score and our mobility indicators. There's practical value in this from a day-to-day perspective for early disease detection, grouping animals, and nutritional management. With locomotion, we've taken a little bit different approach. We want to try to understand locomotion in a different way than what we've done historically. We want to be able to understand the difference in movement and how we could eventually bring this into new traits to describe how animals move, and not just look at mobility in terms of is she lame or not, but how does the animal move? How athletic is she? And so what we're doing is we're outputting multiple gait measurements instead of just a locomotion score by itself. Just a little different approach. Of course, the lameness detection aspect is extremely important. You see other technologies out there that are working on that. There's a lot of value in that. So we want to have more objective data so that we can understand how animals move better and how we can breed animals that move more effectively. So we're looking at some of the things that we're measuring. For example, we're looking at swinging in or swinging out behavior. So that's one form of motion that we're looking at and trying to explore in a different way than what we've done before. And tracking up behavior. So as the animal moves, does the rear foot land in the same place as the front foot as she's walking through the system? So we're looking at some additional items like that beyond just whether or not the animal's lame. When we think about body condition score, you see the contour of the animal here. This is just, and along with the next few slides, are just kind of designed to show you a little bit of what these images look like that we're calculating the traits from. So if we look at body condition score, for example, we're looking at the curvature and the angles around the hooks and around the pins to be able to get at body condition. Now, some of these things are conceptually relatively simple. So when we look at rump width, we identify the pins and we measure the distance between the pins. So that's one of the things that's really different and important to understand about the system that we're developing here, is that we're measuring. So it's really similar to taking a ruler or a yardstick or a tape measure to measure the cows. And that's the way our outputs are. So when we look at rump width in this system, it's not delivered on a 1 to 9 or a 1 to 50 scale. We actually have a measurement of how many millimeters or how many inches that measurement is. In our case, we're interested in inches, but everybody else in the world logically uses the metric system. We're the only ones that have held out on that one. So we also look at something like body depth as we look at the animal from the side. You can see here more of what we're able to capture from the side. Foreudder attachment, looking at the curvature of that foreudder. Teat length, just measuring the distance between the top of the teat and the bottom of the teat. Udder tilt, the difference between the tops of the two teats. So we're able to get a lot of information about the udder. Here's looking at udder depth in a little bit different way. Again, udder depth there is provided in terms of inches that udder, the bottom of that udder is away from the hock. Some of our traits are not in inches or millimeters, but they're in angles. So we look at something like rear legs side view and foot angle. Those traits are delivered as an angle as opposed to an inch or a length. Chest width, an important trait for us to think about, just measuring the distance between the tops of the front legs. Here you can see where we're picking up from that rear camera, how we can measure rear udder width, rear udder height, and measure front teat placement, rear teat placement, and udder cleft. So the system that would be delivered on farm is a system, as I said, that covers 3 cameras. It has a computer and cabling. The goal is really targeting this more toward 1,000 cow plus herds. using RFID or NEDAP identification tags. We need to have good internet service, and Holstein Association is not, we're not hardware people, so we will be working with third parties to do those installations around the country. From this system, we get a rich data set. We have the information about herd management, the locomotion indicators, body condition. We're looking into rumen fill and body weight for future traits. All of our linear traits, they're objective now with this system, so we're measuring the stature, we're measuring the chest width, we're measuring the teeth length. To be able to have this in large herds, to be able to look at changes in animals across time more effectively, and hopefully improve heritability of some of these linear traits by having more objective data. And it's really fun for everybody else to think about other traits. For me, it stresses me out. But I have a list where we sat down early in the project of other things that we could measure. And right now, my list has about 110 traits in it that we could measure on a cow. There's probably more than that. We could measure a lot of things, but at some point we said we have to try to focus and get good at these things before we go to all of these other things that could distract us from our targeted goal. We still keep that list, and we have those in mind, and at some point in the future we will prioritize perhaps exploring additional traits. We do think there's a lot of potential for adding new traits, but for a while it's going to be the 26 that we talked about today, because we want to get really good at those before we try to hit every target in the world. Now, one of the things that I think is exciting about this is that if we have more objective data, there's a lot of potential to improve the heritability of these traits. So this is some comparisons from some work done in the Netherlands, where they were able to use data coming from automatic milking systems to improve the heritability of traits like udder depth, front teat placement, and rear teat placement. So obviously, one of our long-term goals with this system is to be able to bring this data into our genetic evaluations. And we just hired a new geneticist, Jason Graham. Jason is back in the back of the room, and Jason's going to be the one of the ones that helps lead us into the future for this long term, and we're really excited to have Dr. Graham on our team. There is future potential for this beyond where we are today. We want to expand and explore this on multiple large farms. We do think there's a lot of value in those management traits. And to be able to use this data, like I said, the new physical trait evaluations and genetic evaluations to improve the profitability and well-being of the Holstein animals that we work with. Now, obviously, our primary focus has been Holstein, and our primary focus has been U.S. Holstein thus far. But there's a lot of potential with what we have to extend this to other dairy breeds and into beef breeds, and that is definitely on our planning horizon. Another area that I have a lot of excitement for is in thinking about how we can use this data to do more predictive analytics. How can we combine the data that we're getting from the imaging system with genomic data and milk data so that we can do a better job in predicting things like longevity and lameness risk and lifetime profitability to change how we make decisions about individual cows within the farm. I think that's a long-term vision for where we'd like to go with this system. Now, one of the questions that I get all the time about this is this a replacement for your current classification system? And if you've ever heard me give a talk before, or if you know me, you know that I love basketball. So I have to use a basketball analogy in my presentations. Our system is really focused on linear traits, not on final score. I think we think about something like final score, it's a little bit harder for a camera system to capture that overall view of the animal, that 40,000 foot view of the cow, if you will. And my basketball comparison is with a player on the screen here. Anybody know who this player is? Who is he? Jalen Brunson. And why do I show Jalen Brunson? Because Jalen Brunson, if you measure by traditional things that you might measure what makes a great basketball player, he doesn't make the cut. He's not that tall. He's not that fast. He's not that great of a shooter. But man, is he a great basketball player. The sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the whole. So he is really, really a great player. There's more to him than what could be measured by traditional things like how fast or how tall he is. So we think that our traditional existing classification system will continue to have an important role. Another question, of course, is, are we ready to go? Is this system ready to put on farms today? Not quite yet. We're still in the research and development phase. As I said, we currently have the system on 3 farms. We plan to install it on additional farms in 2026, and our development will continue into at least 2027. But we do hope to be ready to be able to sell this system by 2027 or 2028. Why have we done this? Because we're Holstein. We're uniquely positioned to lead this innovation. We have many years of confirmation evaluation, and that's our niche. Years of experience within our classifier team that we've relied on for developing this system. Between the team, those of us that have worked with the system and developing it, years of experience with machine vision, computer vision technologies, and I've spent most of the last 20 years working with dairy technologies and helping to explore how we can use technologies on farms. So we think it'll be difficult for others to assemble the resources that we have to be able to do what we've done to this point. So in review, our goal with the Build a Better Cow project, we're measuring 26 traits with 3D imaging technology with no disruption of cow flow, 365 days of data availability to be able to measure all cows across all lactations. I hope you have a little bit of excitement about what we're doing. It's been thus far an exciting project to work on and will continue to be as we move forward in coming years. And I'm happy now to stop and take any questions that you might have.
First of all, I find this fascinating. If I put my dairyman hat on, what struck me first off was you measure after the cow's been through the parlor. My question is, why not measure also before the cow goes in the parlor? Because if we're looking at motion, locomotion, for example, mobility, that's critical, and that's a relatively low heritability trait. There might be an opportunity to figure out a difference in a cow from, in that regard. I mean, we all love high, wide udders, but you talk about swing in and swing out and that sort of thing. I don't know the answer to this, but can we potentially get feet and leg problem because, say, the rear udder, the udder's too wide? So I guess what I would find fascinating, if more research is done, why not measure before and after, so to speak? Mm-hmm. I think we could learn a lot more information.
Yeah, that's a great set of questions and thoughts, and I appreciate your insight there. The short answer is why did we choose to go on the exit as opposed to the entrance is when we thought about different layouts of farms, trying to find an opportunity to be able to set up to measure 3 cameras going into the parlor is a lot harder. And so it's really a practical limitation. In an ideal world, we would have done going the other way because of all the reasons that you mentioned. We feel like practically we will be able to get the system on more farms by being in the exit alley than in the entrance without affecting cow flow. We could put in something that goes single file for cows into the entrance, but when you get into larger operations, throughput's really, really important. So we didn't want to do anything that would affect throughput. I think some of that will be overcome just by, we're still measuring rear udder width. It's different, of course, when the udder's not full of milk, but it's consistent. So we'll still be able to pick up on the differences that we would be able to see perhaps in a different way than if the udder was full. But I completely understand and agree. In an ideal world, it would be going in.
Thank you. This is fascinating, and I saw a couple posts of yours on social media, so great stuff. I'm interested in the timeline. So what is it that you would need to be able to accelerate that? Is it time, money, more cows being tested, the technology? What's that rate limiter to be able for you to get where you're going faster?
All of the above to some degree. You know, technologies take time to develop, and it involves all those things. It involves time, it involves money, and it involves people. So all of those are limiting factors to some degree. But we're moving forward. Our board is very committed to this project, and I think we are going into an acceleration mode on this. But one of the things that we have thought about a lot is the timeline. And you know, we'd love if we could just go out and you say, if you have a farm, we'd go, let's how much do you want to pay us? And we'll go out there. But I spent 20 years working with technology, and I've worked with a lot of startups, and I've worked with a lot of established companies that have worked with technologies. And one of the things that I've observed is that the established companies tend to be slower at putting something out. The Lavals, the NEDAPs, those companies, they take more time to make sure they get it right before they put it into the field. The startups, no offense to a startup, I've worked with many of them that have been wonderful and had a lot of success, but a startup company needs revenue quickly. And so sometimes they put them out too soon. And I have another presentation, I won't give it today, of all the things that can go wrong with technologies that are put out too soon. We don't want to be that technology. We don't want to be the one that says, I need it tomorrow, and we go and we say, okay, we've got it, but it's not really ready. So we'd rather get it right than get it fast. So that's kind of our guiding principle. And because we are an established entity, that we can do that in a way that a startup necessarily couldn't do. We want to be, I mean, I really want it too. I want to be out there doing all this and have thousands and thousands of cows, but it takes time.
Jeff, I have a couple questions. One is, how many times would an animal have to pass through the thing? It wouldn't seem like if you have them where they could be mobile, that you could move them from farm to farm almost like a classifier rather than have them set up at a place for a long time. And number two, I know, as you just said, where they come through at the beginning rather than after they're milked, obviously the width of rear udder and height of rear udder, and some of the other traits. There's classifiers that score cows every day that go into a herd that has all the cows bagged and cleaned and washed, and the next guy comes into a freestall and he barely gets a glimpse of them as they run down and around the corner. What can we learn from this that will help those guys be more accurate?
Yeah, so great questions. What can we learn that can help those guys? I think that, I mean, I've already had classifiers ask me, so I want to see the data so that I can improve myself. And to me, that's encouraging that our classifiers would ask that. They say, I want to look at that so I can tweak, and if it shows me that I'm not as good at measuring this particular trait, then I can use that to make myself better as a classifier. So I do think that, I mean, really encouraged that our classifiers have asked me that question. So I think that's one area of opportunity. Now I've forgotten your first question. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't have an exact answer, but maybe a week or something like that, because you don't get every candle, not everybody's moving at the right angle and everything, but we don't know exactly what that is. We have had discussions about whether or not to develop a mobile system that could be somewhere down the line that we would look into that, but that's definitely not our first rollout. There's some other challenges that come with that, including transportation of a system and that sort of thing. So, but it is on our discussion list for topics.
Have you considered capturing the animal's weight?
Yes, that is in development. We're not there yet, but that one is still on our short list. That one's not on our long-term list. That's on our short list.
Hi, Jeff. Could you re-explain again the camera differences of your system versus maybe some other ones that have been out on, say, body condition scoring?
So we're getting 3D image of the animals, and some other systems that are out there are doing 3D. Some are doing using more conventional RGB cameras. And I think there's additional information that we can gather from a 3D image that's useful for a lot of the things that we're measuring. Might not be necessary for every application, but the 3D image does provide a little bit more resolution of data to work from. But there are other systems out there that are using 3D cameras also.
I'm curious about calibration of the cameras and the placement. With them being 3D, is there a lot more movement freedom in terms of where you place them and then being able to use that data, the point cloud data?
We have, our standard is to put them at the measurements that we've suggested so that we don't have to, so if it's, I don't remember the exact number, but if it's 12 feet above, it needs to be 12 feet above. You can't go 13 or 11 because it creates unnecessary noise. And then you start getting about, it's not just the calibration, but also what does the camera see? So that goes for each of the 3 cameras. So there's a standard to work with instead of being mobile with where those cameras go. I think Manny had a question back here.
Have you looked into tying any genotypic data into the phenotype and doing a genotype-phenotype correlation?
Not yet. We're not to that stage yet. But
Okay.
That's definitely something we will get to. Jason's ready.
What does your dashboard kind of look like? Do you have like rankings on these cows for how to breed these cows and just, I guess, more on the dashboard sense of things?
Right now, our strategy is not to try to create another dashboard, another user interface. Our strategy is to provide the data to where it could be uploaded into an existing herd management software.
How are you planning on dealing with the young stock?
I'm sorry?
What are you planning on doing with the young stock?
That's another great question, Manny. Young stock, that is another thing that's definitely on our horizon for where we'd like to look. I think there's some real opportunities to understand young stock conformation in ways that we've not been able to understand before that could really help us make better decisions about younger animals. It does require some kind of thought about where do those animals come through to collect the data, but I see a lot of potential for that young stock. Looks like that's all of the questions. I will say, anybody here or anybody else, if you have thoughts, questions, I love the questions. I don't have all the answers to all the questions at this point, but but please bring them to us. We're still working on developing this. We want to hear things like you guys are bringing up here today to make the system better as we move forward, and bring those to me. Feel free to contact me by email, by phone, or whatever. I'm happy to talk to anybody about this anytime. Thank you all.